Welcome to Module 2, Using Twitter in Virtual Education. This will be one of our 6 examples of how best to use social technologies, and very specific social technologies, in your virtual lessons. Now we're going to start each one of these with some basics, and if you're familiar with Twitter, you can skip over this information. Now for those of you that have never used Twitter, or you're using Twitter for the first time in this class, you probably want to think through some of these concepts that we're going to be sharing and then go and explore them on your own in an account that you create for yourself. So a few basics about Twitter. There's no age restrictions. In fact, Twitter will often say, or the representatives from Twitter will often say, if you're old enough to read, you're old enough to use Twitter. Now, privacy can actually be fairly restricted within Twitter, which is a good thing. And in fact, your students can choose when they create their accounts to allow only those people they approve to follow them. So this can really protect your students from being followed or having interactions from people outside of your class if you want to do that. And in fact, if you do want to do that and the students have their own Twitter accounts already, you may want to have them make a separate account that's just focused on their academics so that other people that maybe are following them now can actually follow them in that academic experience. Twitter's style. It's very short in its commentary. In fact, you have a 150 character limit whenever you're posting ideas. It tends to be focused on quick, short ideas, simple questions, or single thoughts. And a lot of times people will share links to pictures or other articles or resources, or they'll often even retweet other people's tweets that they have shared. So you'll see this kind of informal exchange happen. There's usually not a whole lot of good grammar involved in posting to Twitter, but that said, they're usually quick, poignant ideas that are being shared through Twitter. And the pace, I keep saying the word quick, because the pace in Twitter is quick. In fact, it's really good for synchronous activities because you can really follow and move quickly a set of ideas or an idea happening. It's not the best for just checking back but trying to stay on top of things because a lot of times exchanges move very fast. So I encourage you to think about very short durations of time in which you may be using Twitter, or if you're going to use it in an asynchronous, longer term way, know that you need to make sure you're using searches and tags and things like that so that you can go back and find the information amidst all of the kind of work that may be being produced through Twitter. Now, a few more basics. Twitter is great for exploring the world around you or reflecting on your experiences or things that you're watching or listening to. It's great to make quick soundbite type reflections or comments, or it's great to post an idea out there and see how people respond to it. I've seen Twitter used really nicely with guest speakers and experts because if you may not be able to access those people physically in your physical classes that are supporting your virtual classes, or perhaps that person doesn't necessarily want to connect over Skype or use other tools, but you do want to just have your students ask them quick questions, interact with that guest speaker, you could do that very nicely in Twitter because of this sort of short, quick activity, question response kinds of things that you can do in Twitter. You may also want to use this to comment alongside events or activities, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in some lesson examples. But we'll see even in our own professional world, a lot of times when we attend conferences or events, people are tweeting their experiences as they go. And Twitter is also some really good place for some feedback and coaching, just some quick, hey, I just did this, and yep, you're on the right track, or have you thought about this? Quick little comments and coaching and feedback that can happen using Twitter as well. Some of the drawbacks, though, for Twitter. Unfortunately, because of the quick pace, ideas can get lost if they're not tagged properly so that you can search for them. Or if you don't create a separate identity at which you can constantly direct your commentary to. And we'll show you that when we get into Twitter, live Twitter in just a second. But so be careful. Things can get lost because of the pace, and so you really need to be diligent about tagging and notating things. And students, particularly students new to Twitter, may struggle with that a little bit. So really helping people ensure how do you make sure those ideas are being collected in a place where everybody in your class can see them. And then you also have a limited character set in what you can post to Twitter, so that can limit the depth of a thought often. So of course that means it's more applicable for certain types of lessons than others. So speaking of where it's applicable, once again, I mentioned that Twitter is great in synchronous settings. We talked a lot about guest speakers and expert or virtual visits. Doing that within an hour. In fact, we're going to do this week. We're going to have hour-long Twitter chats where you can come in and ask me questions and ask the community questions, and we can all chat very shortly and quickly about some of the ideas that we're talking about in this class. You could also have students tweet their feedback of group activities or presentations. So if they're not actually in the group presenting to one another virtually, but they're actually listening to that presentation or watching that presentation, you can have students tweet as they go their feedback. Oh, loved that you pointed out this idea. Curious what you think about this. I mean, there's lots of things that students can do, and it's a way to keep them engaged in watching each other's projects or work. You can also use Twitter to manage questions around projects or assignments or activities, and then other students can go in and answer those questions, and you can as well. And we'll show you quickly how you answer questions and direct questions when we go into the Twitter exploration. And then finally, it's a great brainstormer. Let's spend a half an hour and let's all just post up ideas. Once again, if you're virtual, brainstorming can be kind of difficult. Brainstorming tends to be a good physical activity or synchronous activity. Well, Twitter could be a great place where you're brainstorming ideas for why electricity is really important to the world around us. And then finally, it can be great for exam preparation. So perhaps you make yourself available as the teacher the night before an exam where students are all working and studying. And you just make yourself available if they've got quick questions. You could point them to a particular page number in their book or a particular reading that you had them do. You could give them quick guidance if they're stuck on how to solve a problem. So Twitter could be a great place to have office hours the night before an exam or a big activity. And then finally, asynchronously, once again, Twitter moves pretty quickly. So asynchronously, it can be a little more challenging unless you're notating things correctly and you're tagging things correctly in Twitter. But you could do it as a way to encourage engagement outside of the class. So if you're having students think about a particular topic in history, let's say, and you want them to be thinking about it not just in your class activities, but at night when they go home or they're working on their homework, this could be a great place where they just throw up a quick idea about what they're reading or what they're thinking about. Or maybe they talk to their parents or grandparents or guardians about that historical event. And maybe they post a couple of quick ideas that they want to share based on those conversations. As I mentioned before, this can be a great place to prepare for the next day and even to do what I like to call just-in-time quizzing. You can always just poke in and have students the night before a particular lesson that you're going to run. Say, okay, the night before or a couple days before, please go in and post things that you're curious about this lesson or things you know or don't know. And then you can use that to modify what you highlight in the lesson so that you're teaching students what they don't know as opposed to what they already know. Okay, so quick question for you to think about while we explore Twitter a little bit. I'm thinking about using Twitter to encourage my students to help one another on a class project. Do you think this is a good idea? And if so, how should I structure that class project so that I can make sure students are using the help that they're getting to improve their projects? If you don't think it's a good idea, why? So while you're thinking about that, we're actually going to go into Twitter and just highlight a few key things to know as you're using Twitter. Now I'm already logged in and this is my home page. One of the first things I want to do is go up and work with my settings. And this assumes I've already made an account. I want to point out in my settings that I do have the ability to be very secure in who's allowed to follow me. I mentioned this before in the presentation. So you see I've gone into settings and security and privacy, and it's on this page where I can protect my tweets. And this is where if I select this, only people that I give explicit permission to follow me can follow me. So basically, you could take a lesson in your class, you could take the first 10 minutes, have students create accounts, go set this privacy, and then go and request to friend one another. You could even create a long list of what's everybody's accounts. Now you need to go and request that you can follow one another so that your students are only following each other and you're only following your students with those accounts, and they're not being exposed to the opportunity to have people outside of your class follow them. You can also encourage your students to disable their location if you don't want them to be able to give very visibly where they're actually tweeting from. Now, there's a lot of other profile things you can do, and I'm sure you'll explore that. But let's talk a little bit about discovering. So as you saw in this class, I actually just started tweeting with the phrase Emerging Trends MOOC so that as you all tweeted as well, you could tag it with that phrase, and then we could easily put that phrase in the search box and follow all of the commentary associated with Emerging Trends MOOC. So I encourage you, if you're not going to have students just directly talk with one another or you're not going to create a profile account for your class, you can choose a phrase that hasn't been used yet, and I just searched a bunch to see what hadn't been used, that students then tag all of their activity every time they post. So here you see I've got my search based on that. Now, if I wanted to respond to Maureen in our course, I could click reply. So she's got her thought of her first week in the MOOC, and I could reply to her and say, hey, I love your thoughts, thanks for sharing them, you've created great ideas, you've given me ideas to think about, or any kind of phrase I would like. When I go to click reply, you'll see it's replying to her and anyone else that she tagged with the @ symbol, so she's directing it towards those people. So I can reply to her and anyone else that's tagged. I can also then attach my pound Emerging Trends MOOC to my tweet, and I'll know that everybody in the class sees it, as well as those 3 people that were tagged within this tweet. I could retweet it if I really like it and include my own comment, and I can even make it a favorite. So that's just some of the basics in Twitter. I'm assuming that you're going to do a lot of other exploration, dive into following different people. You'll probably follow one another from this class because there'll be people you really like their ideas, or they challenge your ideas and you find that valuable. But I encourage you to play with this. You'll see that we've got our Twitter live feed now on our homepage in our course, and we are doing Twitter live chats this week to experience asynchronous activity in Twitter. So thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the other examples for using social technologies in your classes.